thanks very much, and thanks for your patience. And I just look forward to just spending a little bit of time with you this afternoon. And those of you who spend time outside of Washington, welcome to this new reality here. And you're going to be able to get on your planes later on and go back to real reality. But meanwhile, there's a Washington, D.C. version of all of these adventures that we're in right now. Let me try and give you a little bit of a perspective. We're all unpacking the fiscal cliff drama, but let me rewind the tape to a conversation that Dave Camp, as chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, led. This was when he first got the gavel in January of 2011. He whistled both sides of the aisle back in the back library of the Ways and Means room, and everybody sat around that long table back there. Many of you have been back and participated in meetings there. Camp's at the head of the table. The whole committee's all down the whole big table. And he makes three statements that everybody agreed to. He said the tax code is a disaster. And everybody said, yeah, the tax code is a disaster. He said, we are the committee of jurisdiction. And we looked around and we said, yeah, that's right. We're the committee of jurisdiction. We have responsibility for this. And he said, you cannot reform the tax code on a partisan basis. And everybody around that table said, yeah, that's right. This is so big and so complicated and so inextricably linked to who we are as a nation that one party cannot jam tax reform. Now, over the course of the past 2 years, the chairman led the committee, I think, in a very thoughtful way. And if you were going to distill down into a single word what it was that was the theme of the committee over the past 2 years, the word would be competitiveness. In other words, how do you create in the United States the most competitive tax jurisdiction in the world? What does it look like? Where are the problems? Where are the opportunities? And how do you craft something like that? So there's a great deal of work that's been done. There's an opportunity in this moment right now where there is such a high level of dissatisfaction on the part of the American public as it relates to the tax code that this could be a transformational moment. It actually could be. If you go out and you talk to moms and pops, you go banging on doors like I've done for candidates in this past cycle, and you ring on a doorbell in suburban Chicago and you ask somebody, what do you think of the tax code? You basically hit a launch code for these people. Step back, 3, 2, 1, kaboom, because everybody's got something to say about it. Nobody is happy with it. And so where is the opportunity in that? The opportunity is to say, look, nobody likes this thing, so let's fix it. David Moore made a great point the other day. He said, we have 1.4 million Americans under arms. We have 1.2 million Americans, many of whom are present today, exclusively, who are here to help us to just comply with our tax code. I mean, that's ridiculous. And that's a tax code. These are rules that are our own creation. We've made these things. And yet here we are, and it's upon us, and there's an opportunity with this high level of dissatisfaction. Okay, so where are we? Where do we go? And how do we get out of this thing? If you look back, there was an opportunity that the president had during the debt ceiling drama to negotiate in a very substantive way with the Speaker of the House. We've all seen these stories, we've read the Woodward book, we've heard the conversation, we've read the Post accounts. We've all sort of gotten a feel for how this thing was approached. The sense that I get was that, and now I'm completely speculating, but I know I'm right. Here's my speculation. That an opportunity came to the president that he was not, because it was new experience for him, in fairness to him, he'd not been in this milieu before, of that sort of high-stakes negotiations with the opposite party. An opportunity came to him that was fairly close. That was a Speaker of the House, a Republican Speaker of the House, that was putting revenues on the table, and we're all familiar with that equation, but that was putting revenues on the table, and the president thought he had a chance to make the deal sweeter for the president. In other words, that the deal would come back together and it would be even closer the next time and easier to grab and to land. And as we all know, it didn't turn out that way. In other words, where the speaker was where the speaker could be and not any further. And the president, in my view, didn't grasp that. and lay in the deal and instead let it go away. Okay, well that's his prerogative. So here's the question. When another opportunity comes, as another opportunity very likely will come, what's the president's disposition? Is the president's disposition to say, yeah, let's grab this deal and let's put this thing together and let me negotiate on these revenue questions? That is a compelling question. And the answer lies exclusively with President Obama. Now, there's been a lot of lines in the sand that have been drawn, but as I pointed out over the past couple of weeks, the president is given to drawing lines in the sand, and I don't think those lines in the sand necessarily are dispositive, let me put it that way. I think the best indicator of past behavior, or of future behavior, is past behavior. And in the past, the president has signed an extension of the current rates. The House GOP's position, as we all know, is to use that extension as a bridge to tax reform. And so what it comes down to, in some sense, is this. President Obama, if he chooses to, can fundamentally eclipse this entire debate. He can use this moment in a transformational way that really changes the entire debate, and he can basically say, look, the debate about the 01 and the 03 tax rates, that's actually yesterday's debate. Fine, extend them another 12 months, big deal. But let's go to this thing on competitiveness and let's really drive this and let's focus in. And so the president can defend the status quo, and if he defends the status quo, then he continues to have the fight over 01 or 03, or he can lead the nation in a transformational way and completely eclipse the whole scene. I clearly hope he does the latter, because my sense is that the country is really hungry for that. That there's a level of anxiety that most Americans feel out there about the uncertainty of the future. And there's a level of anxiety about the ability of this town to get anything done, to transform donkeys and elephants in any substantive way. And there is a premium percentage on getting something done that's transformative that can be, I think, very, very buoyant from an economic point of view. There's a lot of ambiguity getting on to the Democratic side as it relates to the definitions of the rich. And we've heard everything from 250,000 to 500,000 to $1 million to, hey, that lemonade stand's looking prosperous, to whatever it happens to be. Republicans have been very clear, and there hasn't been a willingness to engage substantively on these rate increases because we don't think it's going to move in terms of growth. We don't think it's good economics. We don't think it closes the gap. And here's a lead that's really been buried. The president, by his own definition, early on in the conversation that he had with the country during the course of the campaign, said that there should be a balanced approach. The lion's share, almost the exclusive nature of the conversation since the election, the balance has been on the smallest part of this equation, right? The president himself laid out a 3-to-1 ratio of spending cuts to revenue increases, and yet there has been zero action out of the White House, zero action out of the Senate as it relates to where these spending cuts are, whether they're substantive, whether they're hocus pocus, whether it's taking, credit for OCO war spending that never was going to happen anyways and just the smoke and mirrors nonsense, or if it really is leaning into where these questions are. So this week, if you haven't met them, there's 35, 36, 37, 38 new Republican members that I encourage you to get to know because they've just come fresh off of the campaign trail. They're going to have a lot to say about the direction that we're going. I have there is a sense in me that the language that the speaker used right after the election was well-crafted, intentional language that was to come out to congratulate the president sincerely on his win, and also to lay out a pathway that says, Mr. President, here's the pathway that can get us out of this, and we're ready to be led. Lead us on this pathway, that the pathway is right that way, and we can get out. We're willing to talk substantively about revenues. We've got to get to them the right way. And so here's the real question. The real question is this: do you let the other team take a victory lap? That's really what it comes down to. If our politics in the United States is all zero-sum game, in other words, if the only way we win is to make the opponents lose, if that's what our politic is, and if that's the reality, then it's difficult to see a thoughtful way out of this that, that doesn't avert a whole lot of hassle. But if by contrast, it's not zero-sum game politic, and if you let the other team take a victory lap, you can imagine a very different scenario. That is, Republicans come to the table and say, look, we're willing to put revenues on the table. Democrats come to the table, and we insist on these rates. Democrats come to the table and say, we are insistent upon more revenues that come into the federal government. Fine, you meet in the middle, you shake your hands, you make your deal, and I think the country sighs a big sigh of relief. So I've listened carefully as the President has spoken. Since the election, I've heard less declaration than I heard before the election, which I think is a good thing. I'm very familiar with how the Speaker of the House is approaching this, and as the House Republicans are now convening and being a part of these discussions, I actually think that we're going to successfully avert the fiscal cliff, because to go over the fiscal cliff is a bucket of crazy. I mean, there's really very few voices, except some very shrill voices right now, that are saying, hey, you know, this is great, Thelma. Hold my hand, Louise. Let's go. There's not really a percentage in that. So as we're moving forward, I think both sides can come out with wins, with straight faces, and if the conversation turns to tax reform. And so there's something going on. There's a lot of churn that's going on. There's a lot of posturing and this and that. But I think when it comes down to it, at least I am confident that there's a pathway forward. Whether we've got the will to be able to do it, that's a different question. But I think that the public has said there's a high expectation. The public was basically like a jury, right? We were all the jurors. We here were like jurors, policymakers, and we went to the judge, the public, and we said, we can't figure this thing out. Let us out. Let's have a hung jury. And the public said, no, go back into the room. Keep working, keep working, keep working. We think you can figure it out. And that's the admonition from the public. Because a public that re-elected President Obama and re-elects a House majority and re-elects a Senate Democrat majority is saying, go back into the room and figure it out, because the answers are there. So you're all going to be a very big part of this. And how you are reflecting what you're seeing here is going to have a big ripple effect throughout the boardrooms and the leadership tables of the companies that you represent. Your expertise is something that we're going to rely on, not just now in these next few days and weeks, but clearly as we're moving into the reform effort. And I look forward to continuing this conversation and being a part of things. But thank you very, very much for your willingness to come around.